recipe mainly. The interesting part about this recipe is that unlike most of the soups that I've made before, the thickening and the creaminess is going to come from roasted dal. We talked about roasting dal before. You want to do it when you're making just regular dal and rice, that kind of thing. But you can also roast your dal and use it as a spice. There's a South Indian condiment called gunpowder or idli dosa powder. Essentially, it's the same kind of dals that we're going to be roasting today. And what you do is that you roast it off with, I think, like sesame seeds and a couple of other spices. I haven't made it in a very long time. I usually buy it or I get it made by somebody whom I trust. So today's version is going to have those same two dals like before. I'm personally not going to add any chilies because I don't use a ton of chilies in my own cooking. You can add some whole black peppercorns if you want. That's perfectly valid. I don't like my personal stuff to be too terribly spicy. If I want to adjust the spiciness, I'll eat some Indian pickle on the side, which has plenty of the salt and the chilies and the oils and things like that. For the actual food itself, I tend to keep it fairly neutral, partially because if I have somebody who I'm sharing the food with, I don't want to blow their socks off. And if I'm kind of tired or, not feeling great, I don't necessarily want to have something that's too spicy, that's going to be too challenging to my stomach or to my head or too much of anything else, especially with how cold it's been as of late. I've been craving a lot of soup, and this is one of those ways where you can sort of sneak dal into your diet, get a little bit more protein, get a little bit more fiber, get a little bit more nutrition into your diet without necessarily feeling like you're eating the dal. Now, mind you, it's been a while since I've done a proper grocery run, and that's why I'm making this particular soup, because I don't have the variety of vegetables that I normally have in my fridge. I only have like a couple of things lying around, and I wanted to use them up before I go buy any other food. Today's quiet day in. It's been raining outside for the past few days. I finally got some sunlight, so I opened up the windows so that you guys can see what I'm doing without having it look like I'm filming on a potato. So let's take a look at roughly what we need to do to get this done, and we'll go through the process together. And if you have any questions, of course, ask down below and we'll talk about it. One more thing is that, like I said, I'm running very low on ingredients, so I am out of almost everything. So this is going to be a very, very basic, simple recipe. There's not going to be a lot of moving parts. There are certainly some cheats and some, I don't want to say shortcuts, but I'm having to substitute certain things for other things, and you'll see what I'm talking about when we get to it. So let's get down to business, and let's make this recipe. Okay, so first and foremost, before you do anything for soup, what I like to do is have a kettle of water boiling. Mine is a 1.7 liter. I can actually fill it up higher if I felt like it, but I just fill it up to the max fill line. I can always add more. This takes about 3 to 5 minutes to come up to a full rushing boil like you see right now. The reason that I boil the water early on is twofold. First off is, in this particular case, I don't have fresh coconut, so I'm using the unsweetened desiccated coconut, and I want to make it taste like it's fresh coconut. So what you have to do for unsweetened desiccated coconut to make it taste good is that you take some boiling water and you add enough to the coconut that it's completely submerged. And what that's going to do is it'll wake the desiccated coconut back up so that when it's time to cook it, it's not feeling like dried coconut anymore. I learned this trick from a Burmese cook on YouTube, where she was talking about she didn't have access to the regular stuff that she would find back in Myanmar, and she said if you're overseas in the United States and you can't find fresh coconut, this is a really good cheat to get the dried coconut back up to snuff so that it behaves the same way. And because in most of the South Indian recipes, when you're using coconut, you're gonna grind it down to a puree anyway. This is not necessarily going to be used in those whole flakes like you would have gotten it from the bag. So you don't even need to worry about buying the large coconut flakes. You can even buy the super fine grated. It's almost powdered, to be honest, if you look for it in the baking aisle. The only thing you want to look out for is sugar. A lot of the commercial desiccated coconut is sweetened, and that's going to taste pretty disgusting if you're using it with soup. So avoid anything that has any listed sugar. Flip it around to the back, even if it doesn't say it on the front that it's sweetened. Flip it around on the back, make sure that there's no added sugar, and just get the plain desiccated coconut. And what else I have for the soup today is chayote. We have cooked with this vegetable before. My friend Katie likes to say that the backside of it looks like somebody without any teeth smiling at you. So there's that mental image. Enjoy. And I have some daikon radish. The reason that I'm using daikon radish is because when I bought this, it was fine, and then after exactly 1 day in the fridge, it had started going really limp and soft, and I didn't want to throw it away, and I wanted to use it up. So what I did is that I took off the top and the bottom with a knife, and I'm not sure if you can really see it, but the edge where I cut the daikon is almost like kind of bulging out a little bit, because what I did was that when I didn't peel it yet. This peeling I did just now. What I did was that I took off the top and the bottom, and then I submerged it in water in a deli container that I put into my fridge, and I left it there overnight. And overnight, it just woke right back up, and it's nice and firm again, like it's supposed to be. It's that nice crisp texture that daikon is supposed to have. So if you have any daikon or turnips or other kind of radish that looks like it's about to go south, make sure that you cut off one of the ends. Probably the stem end would be the most sensible, so that water can come in, and then just submerge it in water overnight. 6 to 12 hours should be enough, and the next morning you'll have everything nice and firm again. You can do that to your chayote as well, but chayote tends to stay firm for a long time, so I don't really have to worry about it too terribly much. And for the spices, I'm going to be using chana dal, and I'm going to be using urad dal, and both of these are about 1/4 cup, and I'm going to be using whole coriander seeds. Now, each of these things will cook at different rates, so what you want to do is roast them separately and then bring them all together, either in a spice grinder or in a blender with your coconut. Either or is fine. What I like to do for insurance is that I'll roast these first, roast this one afterwards, and just let it come down to room temperature, run it through run it through the spice mill, the spice grinder, and then I have the powder. Then when I grind the coconut, I combine everything together and give it a good hit in the blender. Mind you, I do have a very powerful blender, so I could ostensibly just throw this in and it'll be fine, but I don't want to take a risk of having any little chunks of dal that aren't ground down all the way. So in this particular case, because there's really not much for the soup to hide behind, this is such a simple recipe, I am going to keep things fairly simple, and I'm going to take out as much insurance policies as I can to make sure that the dal is ground all the way down. The second reason that I bring up water to boil in my hot water kettle is that when it is time to cook the soup itself, I want to get started as fast as possible. I do have a gas stove, mind you, so this is significantly faster than my old electric stove used to be, but old habits die hard, and honestly, when I'm in the process of preparing for making something, I'd rather have all my things lined up neatly so that when it's time to cook, everything goes very quickly. Because realistically, this soup should take maybe 10-15 minutes of actual cooking time, and maybe like 5-10 minutes or so of simmering with the ground dal and the coconut. So realistically, I should be able to finish this in about 30 minutes if I have my water boiling hot. And if I wanted to take a super shortcut, I could even put that into a pressure cooker and give it a few minutes in there, and it should be fine. But for the sake of this presentation, I'm just going to leave it as is in a regular pot, and you guys can adapt it to pressure cooker as need be. The reason that I have the weighing scale out is that some of you guys have been asking me to give more exacting measurements as to what everything is. To be honest, it doesn't really matter all that much if these measurements are exact, but I will oblige you guys. So the chayote right now that I'm working with, can't focus, is about 2 pounds, give or take. And with the daikon added in, total is about 3 pounds. So roughly 3 pounds worth of vegetables. You can do more, you can do less. You don't necessarily have to use this exact configuration. The reason I'm using this is because my brother's friend makes this type of soup for me all the time whenever I go visit. When I asked her for the recipe, she gave me the quick rundown of the dals that you have to roast and grind with the coconut to make it delicious. And her recipe is one that I have been able to get close to, but I've never been able to recreate. But that's okay, because that means that the next time I go down to Virginia to visit my brother, I have something to look forward to that I can't get at home. And she is incredibly kind and very generous with her cooking. So every time I come down, she knows how much I love that soup. So she makes it for me every time. So I know that this is not going to be the same exact recipe that she's using. She uses different spices. She uses different vegetables. This is a sort of variation of it. Basically because I want you guys to have the technique of the roasted dal and the coconut coming together to make this creamy dish. I might end up adding coconut milk. I'm not 100% sure yet. But let's see where it goes. I'm gonna see how this works out with the dal and see if it's good. And if it's fine, then I'll leave it as is. But if it can use some coconut milk, I'll probably add a few splashes of coconut milk to just round it out. Because like I said, this is not fresh coconut. This is desiccated coconut that I am replenishing in boiling water. So like I said, the 2 reasons that I keep boiling water ahead of time, in fact, let me just, I'll give it a hit again when it's time to put the vegetables on, is because first I want to rehydrate the coconut. Secondly is because I want to get this going so that when I put the soup on the stove, we are done. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back in a few minutes and I will show you how I roast the dal. So back in the day, and you can even do this if you want, is that I would take all these separately, put them on the stove, roast them until they were done. And what I found is that it generally ended up with me having to stand over the stove for a long time while I couldn't do anything else. I couldn't really just leave these guys to park and then go off and do something else. What I discovered is that they work just as fine in the oven as they do on the stove. However, you don't have to sit there and stir them and do all kind of other aggravation. It's just a question of putting them into heat and they do their business. So now this is a toaster oven / convection oven, but if you have a regular toaster oven or just using a regular oven, that's fine. I'm gonna put this in for 8 minutes at 180 degrees Celsius or 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and I'll hit start. And I'm not even going to worry about the preheat cycle. As it comes up to heat, what that does is that it gets the dal acclimated to the cooking temperature, and that way it doesn't shock anything and nothing goes crazy. It just sort of slowly comes up to temperature, cooks for 8 minutes, and then this thing screams at me and beeps when it's done. So now I have time to go back and chop my veggies, and that way I can cut down my active cooking time into a lot less than it would be if I had to do all this on the stove. So I will be back. Okay, so it's been about 2 minutes or so since I started the chopping of the vegetables and the preheating of the oven. So let's go back. The toaster oven has been going for about 30 seconds on full heat. It finished preheating. The preheating process took about 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes or so. The dal is already starting to roast and my kitchen smells absolutely incredible, so I'm very pleased with that. And the pieces that I've cut, the daikon, I don't know, I would say it's 1.5 inch, 2 inch cubes, give or take. You don't have to be too precious about this. As long as everything's roughly the same size, you'll be fine. You can also, like I said, add other veggies to this. Potatoes are fine, carrots are fine, any kind of root vegetable that takes a long time to cook. This is a perfectly good place to use those up. But because I haven't gone shopping, I'm keeping it very, very simple. In fact, the recipe that my brother's friend makes when I go down there to Virginia, she just uses the chayote. She doesn't even have the daikon. But because I had the daikon and I want to use it up, that's why I'm adding it. And like I said, it's only been now about a minute and change while the oven's been going, and the dal, while it roasts, has this incredible smell. It smells so good, and the beauty of the little toaster oven is that I can take a peek through the little window and keep an eye on it so it doesn't get too browned on me. So this is gonna be ready to roll in like just a few minutes, and then once these guys, I'm just gonna throw them on the stove to boil for a little bit until they're fork tender, I guess, and then we're gonna add all the accompaniments as you know on top of it to spice it up. Most likely, what I'm gonna do next is I'm gonna prepare some curry leaves and some mustard seeds and some asafoetida to do as the tarka for this situation. You don't necessarily have to do that step, but it does always make things more delicious. So not, like I said, not here to tell you how to live your life, but this is a good life choice. Second thing I'm going to do is also I'm going to make a pot of rice while I wait for the stove to come up to boil with the veggies in there. The reason I'm not boiling the water first and then adding the veggies is that I want everything to come up together, you know, to heat, so that it doesn't get mushy on the outside and crunchy on the inside. I want this to be evenly cooked all the way through. Same thing happens with potatoes. I prefer to put them in with the water straight out of the kettle and they're cold from the fridge so that everything comes down to about room temperature, and then shove it on the stove at high heat so that as it comes up to heat, it can do its business all at once, and we're not faffing about too much with waiting for this or waiting for that. It'll all come up to temperature fairly quickly, and it'll probably need to boil for like 5 to 7 minutes, and we should be good. So I shall return. Okay, so a little bit of an update. These seeds are not burned, they're just browned like they should be. The dal is also very well browned. Ooh, that's hot. And the chana dal is browned. Everything's nicely browned. And this only took about 3.5 minutes. It didn't take the full 8 minutes. So probably next time what I'll do is that I'll set it for 4 minutes, give it a stir, and then see where it goes. So this was very pleasant. I'm pleasantly surprised that it went so quickly. Usually if I put it in the regular oven to roast these dals, it takes me about like 15 minutes or so. So I have to do like 7 minutes, turn the trays 7 minutes, and then do that whole process. But I guess because this is a much smaller oven, the convection oven, it probably goes a lot faster. So, but I'm happy. If I had let these stay for 1 minute longer, they would have absolutely burned to heck and back. But since I guess it is a convection oven, I could have, you know, just made another batch and it would have been fine. But like you see, like they're not burned, they're just well browned. But against the white plate, it looks like they're really dark. Like I said, the entire apartment smells amazing. I really like the smell of this roasted dal. So I think if for no other reason than just to make the spice blend that you add to random things, definitely give this a try. It's really smelling nice. Okay, so due to that unscheduled detour where I had to pull out the dal a little bit early, I figured let me just throw the vegetables and the water into the pot. So these are coming up to the boil right now. And if you want to take a look, I have my heat set at medium heat because, let's look at the flame underneath. You see how, hold on, let me turn off the light so you can see this easier. There we go. All right, so you see how the flames on the gas stove are coming all the way from edge to edge of that pot. The reason that I'm keeping this at medium heat is, first off, I don't want any sticking in the bottom of my pot. And what happens is that if you overdo it with the heat, it will overboil, it'll come too quickly. You don't need all that. So just let this kind of park at that medium heat and you should be fine. To be honest, once it does come to the full boil, I'm probably going to reduce this all the way down to low. And on my stove, this is what low looks like. It's almost turned off. So you see how low it goes there? Technically it does go lower, but like a stiff breeze will turn it off. So like I don't like to keep it that low. So right now I just have it as dead set medium, so is that when it does come up to a full rushing boil, I have somewhere to go. that I'm not hitting it with full high heat, because also you see how shiny my pot is. That is stainless steel, and you see how there aren't any like serious stains or anything on the outside. I do clean my cookware, you know, nicely, but the thing is like this wouldn't be staying so nicely if it wasn't for the fact that I don't let the heat go above medium when I have my nice cookware on there, and I just threw everything in there. So now it's time for me to go make the rice, and once that's done, we will reconvene in a few minutes. Now, while we're here, let's talk rice. If you take a look at the size of my rice cooker, it's a 3-cup, which means that I can measure out 3 rice cooker cups worth of rice, and that will fill up all the way once I add the amount of water to it. What I see a lot of people doing is that they'll measure out the rice, they'll put it into the rice pot, and they'll wash the rice inside the rice pot. There's a couple of issues with doing this. First off, right now I have 2 cups of rice. So let me show you and this is rice cooker cups. This is not like actual cups. So let me show you what it looks like when I put 2 rice cooker cups worth of rice in there. Right? So that comes up about I want to say a quarter of the way up. That means that the amount of water that I can put is about here when I'm washing out the rice. That doesn't give my rice a lot of space to move around. It doesn't give it a lot of water to move around in. What ends up happening is that then you have to go through and rinse and rinse and rinse and rinse and go through a million times and rinse it off, and it drives you crazy, rather than just using a bigger bowl and rinsing it off in there and then transferring from here to here. The second issue with doing this is that with an electric rice cooker, the elements on the inside of the cooker are expensive and delicate, so you want to keep these as relatively clean as possible. But this little aluminum piece right here, this metal piece right here, rusts very easily and it goes off on you very easily. So you want to protect that at all costs. The only way you're going to do that is by keeping the outside of this pot bone dry. You don't want any moisture on the inside rice pot. What you want is for the rice pot to be as dry as humanly possible. And this can be wet. This is fine. Anything on the inside is perfectly fine. But the rice pot itself, you want to keep dry. So let me show you like an example. Wash, 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 rinse, rinse, rinse. Now, even if you're relatively careful, what happens is that little drops of water end up on the outside of the rice pot, and that has a risk of floating to the bottom and damaging your rice cooker. So even if you didn't spend a ton of money on your rice cooker, it's just not very responsible to treat your electronics in such a way that they could get damaged. So better to be on the safe side and just keep everything nice and clean and dry and separate for its use. The rice pot is good at cooking your rice. It's not good for washing your rice. What you want to do when you wash your rice is to put it into a larger bowl and then take it to the sink, right? And then give it a good rinse. So now this is significantly more water than my rice pot would ever hold. That means that I have space in here to move the grains of rice around, and we don't necessarily wash the rice just to get rid of the starch. I mean, that's a nice bonus so that the rice stays more separate, but like what if you're eating something like glutinous rice where it's meant to be a little bit sticky, or sushi rice where it's meant to be a little bit sticky, or even Thai jasmine rice where it's meant that stickiness is a good thing. That's not a bug, that's a feature. What you're doing when you wash off the surface of the rice is that there is dust and dirt and various foreign materials that gets in contact with the rice from the time that it's harvested from the field until the time it reaches your plate. So what you're doing when you're washing off your rice is you're taking off all that surface grime and dirt and grit and heavens knows what else. And I'm not really going out there and buying the organic free-range rice. I'm just buying, like, you know, the jasmine or the basmati or whatever rice I can find. That means then that, like or not, there's going to be a little bit of pesticide residue on the outside of the rice. There's nothing to be done for it except to wash it off. Now, mind you, you're not going to get 100% of it off. you're never gonna get your rice so squeaky clean that you'll have it all off. But to be honest, it does make sense to be a little safer than not. And just get the stuff off. It's fine. Now I want you to notice something. This is rinsing number 3, and you can already see the water going from cloudy to clear. Once I disturb it, of course, it's going to get a little bit more cloudy, but if you don't remember how cloudy this was when we began, I want you to rewind and rewatch it, and you'll see what I'm talking about. You see how just the 3rd rinsing and we're already nice and clean now. And this is why when you see in a recipe written by an Asian person that says just wash it a couple of times and until the water runs clear, and you're going crazy trying to figure out, what am I doing wrong? Why is my water not running clear as quickly as theirs is? Well, part of it is that they're probably using a rice pot that's significantly bigger than yours. They're making more rice than you are, so they're not using this tiny little dinky rice cooker that only makes 3 cups. Theirs probably makes 10 cups. So first off, that bigger pot is going to give you plenty of more space to rinse off the rice in, but we've mitigated that now. We've made our own separate our own separate vessel to wash the rice in. And in just a couple of washings, the waters run clear, which is what you're looking for. So now we can go ahead and make our rice as normal. And as I might have mentioned before, but let's just review it anyway. I measured 2 rice cooker cups of water. That means that I want to fill water to the 2-cup line in the rice cooker. That's how that works. So this is going to go in. Let me see if I can do this one-handed. We're going to find out. Come on, guys. And I made a mess. That's all right. If you're doing this two-handed, you're not going to make as much of a mess, I hope. Hold on. All right. So that I could prevent the entirety of all my ancestors waking up and shaming me, I got the rice that I spilled onto the cutting board and I put it back in here, so we're good. But let's go get some water. Then we go in here and we fill it up to the 2-cup line. A little more, a little less. You don't have to be too precious about it, but you know, get as close to the thing as you can. Then you go away. And there we go. 15 minutes, I'll have rice. Cool. So now let's go back to the stove and take a look at what's going on here. See, the water is just coming up to the boil. It has been now, I want to say, about 10 minutes, maybe 12 minutes, give or take. The rice detour took some time, so this is coming along nicely. It'll come to the full rushing boil. By now, the spices should be cool. Yeah, they're cool to the touch. So I can go ahead and grind them in my spice grinder, and then I'm gonna combine them with the coconut, make a masala paste out of that, and then I'm gonna do a tadka to throw on top of this thing when it's done. And let's see where we go. So give me a couple of minutes, I'll be right back. Okay, so the rice has been going for about 13 minutes now, which also means that now the soup, the veggies, have been going for about, I want to say 15 to 20 minutes, give or take. And they are fork tender at this point. So I'm going to add in the masala paste, and we're going to see where this goes. So this is the quarter cup of dal, it was a quarter cup of chana dal, quarter cup of urad dal, and about like 3 good tablespoons of coriander seeds that I roasted in the oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 180 degrees Celsius for 3.5 to 4 minutes. Then I ground it down to a complete powder, and I combined it with 1 cup of desiccated coconut, the large flakes. If you use the smaller one, you want to use about 1/2 cup, and about 1.5 cups to 2 cups of boiling water that I used to rehydrate the coconut in. And then I took the spice powder and I took the desiccated rehydrated coconut and ground it in my blender until it became the nice puree. And now I'm going to add it to the soup because this is pretty much done. And like I said, I originally was thinking that I was gonna add some coconut milk to just round this out, but I don't think I'll need it, to be honest, because this looks plenty creamy on its own. But let it come up to a boil and we'll see where it goes, because it's gonna thicken some once the dal boils. But it smells incredible. That is my pressure cooker venting itself. And it's actually already thickened, to be honest. This has gone from like a thin liquidy soup to a much thicker one. So I will taste at the end of this process. I'm gonna give this another 8 minutes or so to simmer. I'm gonna turn down the heat to like medium low and just let this park for about 8 to 10 minutes or so. And in the meantime, we're going to make the tarka. So I shall return. Okay, so as most tarkas go, this is a fairly simple one, not too many ingredients going on. This has been bubbling away for about 5 minutes, and I feel like I'm actually going to add the coconut milk like I thought I originally would, because this is looking a little stodgy. I want it to be a little creamier, so I will adjust with coconut milk as necessary, but not necessary, you can do without. So this is oil heating in a pan. It's about a half teaspoon of mustard seeds, half teaspoon of cumin seeds, about a few stalks of curry leaves. Turn off the heat, and then just like a little teeny bit of asafoetida, just to bring out the flavor. And that's it. Like, this is, and that goes. Scrape out the pan, make sure that it's all in there. And I shall return with the coconut milk to adjust this, so we shall return. Yep, there we go. The coconut milk was the right choice. Now it doesn't look like porridge. It looks more creamy. It looks more like a stew. This is exactly what I wanted. So it's done, and this goes really great with rice. At this point, I'm going to taste it for salt and season as I need to. You might prefer seasoning a little bit earlier, but since there's really nothing in here with a ton of starch, I don't really bother with seasoning ahead of time. If this had some potatoes or some other starchy vegetable, I would want to season it fairly early on, but because that's not the case, I can just add it at the end and taste and adjust as I need to, because with the amount of liquid that's boiling and evaporating, and then you're adding stuff and you're diluting stuff and you're doing all kinds of stuff, it's going to change the nature of how things go. At the moment, the veggies are all cooked until there's some firmness. It's not completely mushy, but you can take this down as far as you'd like. If you want it softer, by all means, go longer. This took about 25-30 minutes on the stove of cooking continuously over like a medium bubble. It wasn't boiling harshly. It wasn't simmering. It was somewhere in between. And I would say that's a pretty reasonable amount of time to go from zero to soup. So considering that we didn't have to chop up any aromatics, we didn't have to faff about with a ton of ingredients. These are just a couple of ingredients that if you have kicking around, throw it in there, add some spices, add some dal, add some coconut milk, call it a night. This is beautiful. I'm very pleased with this. It smells amazing. It's gonna taste really good with some rice, or you can just have it straight up. It doesn't necessarily have to be with rice. I just like it with rice. So hope you guys join me next time, and I will see you with the next recipe. Bye.